Welcome to She Means Business, Building and Scaling with Visionary Women, the podcast where bold ideas find success. Hosted by Dr. Myrrha Satow, a successful entrepreneur. Each episode dives into the journeys of trailblazing women who have turned their dreams into thriving businesses. From startups to scaling success, these female founders share their stories, struggles, and strategies to inspire and empower women to chase their own dreams. Whether you're just starting out or ready to take your venture to the next level, this podcast is your guide to breaking barriers and redefining leadership. Let's rise together.
Welcome to another episode of She Means Business, where we talk about successful strategies to help other women excel in leadership, entrepreneurship, and business. We also explore important and practical ways to overcome organizational hurdles, all the way from startup to scaling your business and taking it to the next level. Through this whole journey, I've had so many incredible women on our show, and I feel so blessed and fortunate to have so many great women share their journeys with us. And today, I'm especially delighted to have Dr. Bethany Klynn with us to talk about her journey in business. She's currently in leadership. She's a leadership coach. She's a psychologist, a business owner, and a professor at one of our local universities in Ohio. She has vast experience in leadership and leadership development and so much to offer. She's truly a special person who I've known for over a decade. So welcome to the show, Bethany. We're so excited to have you here, and we can't wait to hear about your journey in business and leadership and just to learn more about you. So tell us first a little bit more about your background and what brought you here to your consulting business and a little bit about you.
Absolutely. So I was getting my PhD at Ohio State in what's called industrial organizational psychology. It's psychology of the workplace, I like to say. And we would always have different businesses and consulting firms come to the university and hire us to do consulting projects. Well, I was about 22 years old and realized very quickly that I had never worked anywhere and no one should listen to any of my advice, and decided that although I was really interested in consulting, that I needed some more business experience. So I took a role at a company here in Central Ohio, L Brands, that at the time I joined in the late 90s owned a lot of brands, and thought, this is great. I'll work here for a few years. I'll get some business experience. I ended up staying for 21 years, so a little longer than I initially intended, but there was so much great work to do and so many talented people, and when you're in a large company, you get a lot of opportunities to move around, so it felt like every few years I was getting a new role. Ultimately, I was in charge of leadership development, associate engagement, learning and development, company culture initiatives.
Wow, and that was a really big company. How big was the company at the time you were doing all these things?
So it was about $14 billion. And with our seasonal associates included, we'd end up having about 100,000 employees at certain times of the year.
And what was your role?
So I was the head of what we called learning and engagement.
Okay.
So that was leadership development and associate engagement and all of those things. Yeah.
That's incredible for so many people. So I bet you had a lot of opportunities to help develop leaders within the organization, within a vast organization, a successful organization like that, for so many years.
Yeah.
That's incredible. One of the little quotes that you sent us that I really loved was that you like to help women sort of find and develop their own leadership style. Did you have any opportunities like that when you were at L Brands?
I really did. So L Brands is in retail, owned companies like Victoria's Secret and Bath & Body Works. And what's interesting about retail is that it ends up being really a high percentage of female leaders within the company. Wow. So I really had the opportunity to work with a lot of male and female leaders, and especially female presidents and CEOs at different times, and really at all levels, helping them, whether it was helping them really understand, gosh, I'm at a new level, how do I want to lead differently, or I want to teach how do I do that? How do I take these things that I kind of know without even thinking about them and teach them to other people, which is a really important thing that, pretty senior leaders can do. And just helping them figure out, yes, who they are and what's important to them in how they're leading, how they're showing up, what they want other people to take from their leadership and learn from them. So yeah, a lot of great opportunities there to do that.
That's amazing. And you had such a long run there and such a successful run. It must have been really challenging to think about, leaving a position like that sounds like it was so rich with opportunities for you to grow and to develop other leaders, and to go out kind of on your own and kind of do this away from that safety net of an organization and do it just for you. Can you talk to us a little bit about that and what that was like?
Absolutely. So right about I had been thinking about getting back into consulting for some time, and right about the time that I felt like I was ready, just a personal note is that my husband wanted to leave his firm that he had been at also for about 20 years. And so we decided, okay, that's a little too much upheaval. So he changed firms, and we made sure that he loved it there, and he does. And then it was time. I wasn't able to leave right away. I resigned in October of 18, and my last day was May 31st of 2019. Oh, wow. I had been there for so long, and they kept saying, well, here's one more project, or could you do this one more thing, or could you? And I did love it there, and I, cared about so many of the people. I didn't want to leave them in a bad position, but I did finally have to say, okay, I have to draw a line in the sand. And so what I did was I told them in the spring, my kids at the time were 9 and 12, and I said, I'm not going to get a babysitter this summer. And so that's it. Because when you're starting your own firm, you don't have this hard deadline that you're marching toward. And so it gave me a date to be able to say, okay, I am spending the summer with my kids. And so I remember it clearly. Their last day of school was May 30th. They came to work with me on May 31st, helped me pack up 21 years. And then we had the summer of our lives while I started to network.
That's amazing. Yeah. I love that story. That's amazing.
Yeah, it was great. It was a great summer.
I bet they loved it too. I bet your kids really loved it.
Absolutely.
Oh my gosh.
Absolutely.
Well, I kind of want to dig in a little bit more too about how you founded Insight Leadership Consulting. So you made this decision. I'm sure it was very challenging to leave, but you made that decision. You spent the summer with your kids. And so why Insight Leadership Consulting?
Sure. Yes, I will say that consulting to me felt like such an incredible opportunity and this thing I had always wanted to do. And when you work in an organization, you do whatever's needed. When you're starting your own company, you get to pick and choose which things you want to do and which things, where you're going to focus. So I really took the things with me that either I was the most passionate about, or I thought, oh, this, I think I've done a pretty good job here in the past. Or maybe most importantly, where I had seen the biggest impact for leaders. There were some things I did that I wasn't sure I wanted to do going forward, or I wanted to be known for those things, and other things where I said, yes, these are. So the one-on-one executive coaching that I do, I just have seen how leaders change and thrive because of coaching. The broader leadership development I do, where I go in and create and facilitate leadership programs, help teams work together more effectively. I do a lot of assessment work with leaders, helping them understand themselves and what it might mean.
What kinds of assessments? Do you use the 360-degree approach, or are there others that you like?
Yes, so I use a few different ones. I do use some 360 tools.
Okay.
I will say when I am coaching leaders, I prefer what I call stakeholder interviews.
Okay.
So if I were coaching you, you might give me a list. It would be the same people you would invite to participate in a 360 survey, but instead I spend about a half hour with each of them interviewing them. So it might be your peers, your direct reports, your boss. And I end up getting a lot more value out of that than I do a 360 survey because it's just richer. People go into more detail. I can sort of glean themes from it in better ways. I use the Hogan assessment pretty regularly.
Okay.
I really like the Hogan. I am a data and science person at heart. There's all kinds of scientific validation behind it, so I'm very comfortable with that. I also use an emotional intelligence instrument pretty regularly. It'll depend. It'll depend on the situation. Okay. But I chose those things that I just had seen made the biggest difference for leaders.
So you use the data from those tools to help develop leaders and help them find sort of their superpowers or their strengths, or what do you do with that data once you get it?
Sure. So there's a couple different things. There are some companies that I work with that like to assess leaders before they hire them. So for example, I assessed a leader about 2 weeks ago. He was given the promotion. It was an internal promotion. I met with him yesterday, and we just debriefed his results, and we went over together, what did it mean for him? What did it mean? It was a promotion. He was stepping into a larger role. What might he need to look out for? I find on a lot of these assessments, I believe in leaning in on strengths, and I believe strengths can become overdone. And I think it's overdone strengths that end up getting in leaders' way a lot of the time.
Interesting. Talk to us a little more about that. I think that's fascinating.
Sure. So maybe you're somebody who was applauded earlier in your career for really getting things done and rolling up your sleeves and doing it. And now it's later in your career and you're not a great delegator, or you take on too much of it. Or maybe you got a lot of praise for being very direct and not being afraid to speak truth to power. And these things are strengths. And I do not want to diminish them or say they shouldn't be. But if overused, they can get in your way. They can become a weakness. And so I spend a lot of time with my clients talking to them about their strengths, identifying when, if at all, they have become overdone strengths, and then helping them think through, okay, I'm not changing who they are, but let's talk about behaviors. Are there ever times where you just need to be a little more nuanced in your approach, or you just need to think about, there might be a different way or a different style, or if I really want to influence these other senior leaders, I might want to just have more styles that I can utilize instead of just the one style that I might be most comfortable with.
So interesting. I love that. Thank you for sharing that with us. So over your 25 years of experience, 25 plus, how have you seen leadership development evolve, and what sort of trends have you noticed, particularly for female leaders?
Sure. It's a great question. Like I said, I really have had the benefit of working with a lot of leaders. And now that I'm in my own business, I've also had the opportunity to see a lot of different industries. The truth is, leadership is leadership, but there are some differences as you look at size of companies and as you look at, different industries. There are, pace of change and things that do matter. I would say when it comes to leadership development, I think in the past there was more of a, hey, let's just put leaders through a program and it'll be great for all of them. And as with many other trends, we're much more into customization. And I think that works really well for leadership development. It's why I think executive coaching goes well.
So do you look more at the individual and how you can customize the training for them? Is any of that gender specific?
Yes. So I would say yes, I absolutely customize. When I am working with a client, I don't come in with the agenda, say, for what she needs to work on. I get to know her. I understand where she is now and where she needs to go. I get feedback from her stakeholders. And then we set goals from there. And I would say that's right there is the customization. It can very much be what she needs in the moment she needs it. I do get a lot of female leaders with whom I work that are maybe navigating, I'm the only female on an executive committee, or I'm the only female in this function, or I'm the first. I also have worked with a lot of female leaders of color who are also trying to navigate that.
Sure.
And so helping them understand, again, how do they want to show up? Where can they find advocates and sponsors in the organization who will, speak up for them when they're not even there, or who will back them up in certain situations? That ends up being a pretty important topic for a lot of the female leaders I work with.
Interesting.
Yeah.
That's so helpful. That's so cool. So what are some of the unique challenges you've seen that female entrepreneurs, female leaders have faced when stepping into those leadership roles? You touched on that a little bit. And you gave us a little insight on how you help them navigate those. Are there any other unique challenges that you see women encounter in those roles?
Absolutely. So there's some research about being the only. So I have worked with a number of female leaders who are the only female leader that sits on the executive committee, or the only female director on the finance team, whatever that looks like.
It sounds exciting and challenging.
It is, because a lot of the research says it's exactly both things. A lot of the research says it's harder to speak up when you're the only, or people think you're the representative when you're the only. And this can be in any way, but maybe it's a room full of female executives and you're the only male. Whatever it is, it can be harder to be the only. And so a lot of the leaders with whom I work, if that's their challenge, I mean, we really talk about what that means for them and how to navigate the different personalities in the room and how to influence them in different ways. When they are no longer the only, that also is very interesting, because then there's questions of, do people assume we have an alliance? What if we don't agree on everything? And a lot of my work, centers around things like, psychological safety, helping people be comfortable, or how to have healthy conflict. And female leaders need those skills,
for sure,
certainly as they're navigating whatever challenges they're facing.
That's fascinating. That's so interesting. So do you approach your executive coaching differently for female leaders compared to male counterparts? Is it similar? You talked about that customization and that tailoring.
Yeah, I would say going into it, I mean, the process is the same.
Yeah.
It's understanding where they are, it's understanding where they need to be or want to be, and then making progress if there's a gap there. So the process is the same, male or female. But I do have a different understanding of what it's like to be a female leader. And so I would say, although the process may be the same, certainly the conversations are different. Many of the male leaders with whom I work don't mention being male, but many of the female leaders with whom I work mention being female. And I, of course, can relate to it, having, myself having been an executive in a large corporate environment.
So cool. That's so cool. So let's shift the conversation a little bit. I want to talk a little bit about employee engagement and culture and workplace culture. I think for a lot of women starting their own business or trying to bring it to scale and to address some organizational issues, culture issues, and challenges, that can be a crucial topic. So how, in your work with various companies, how important is employee engagement and culture in shaping and developing effective leaders, especially like in that fast-paced startup world?
I really appreciate the question. Employee engagement is so important. And I've had clients with whom I've worked who didn't think it was important, who thought paying their people more and more would sort of smooth over any other issues that were going on. And of course, it didn't. People, when people are really only incented to stay financially, they're more compliant than they are committed. And so with engagement, you really see that extra effort, that going above and beyond, people, really being champions of the workplace, bringing other great talent in. And so employee engagement, I'll start by saying employee engagement is really important, whether you are a startup or whether you are a much larger enterprise. And there are ways you want to think about it over time. I have a client I'm working with right now who is growing rapidly. And they started with, 3 or 4 people around a kitchen table working together. And now they have about 2,000 employees. They're about 4 years in. And they're trying to think, are there parts of that original culture that still work for us that we want to hang on to, but are there parts that had more to do with the startup experience? And now we actually have to be maybe a little more formal in the way we're doing things, or a little more, just a little different, a little more, it's very easy to collaborate when there are 4 of you sitting around a kitchen table, and you have to be more intentional about it as you grow. So I spend a lot of time with them on, like I said, what are those parts of your culture that are still working, and what are the parts you need to address differently, because maybe there were aspects there that were better when you were a smaller business.
That's so clever. Amazing. I love that. So can you explain the role of onboarding and leader assimilation in ensuring the success of new leaders and their teams? So when they're bringing on new teams, hiring new people, trying to grow their business to scale, and experience some of those growing pains that you just talked about. Right. How important is it to onboard them into the mission and culture and the vision that you have for your company?
I believe it is critical to onboard your leaders and to do it well, and to do it with intention and care. And it can be, yes, making sure they understand the mission, the vision, the values. It can also just be, who are the people and how does work get done here? And how do I navigate? I work with some organizations that things are very clear, and others that are more relationship based, and you have to kind of know the right people to get certain information or to get things done. And that's really hard to do if you're coming in from outside the company. So what I have seen from the clients, with whom I've worked, is the more effort they put into onboarding, it really speeds up the assimilation process. I have worked with organizations, to use a term, it's almost like organ rejection. Like they're not bringing in the right leaders, and then they're not doing anything to help those leaders succeed while they're there. And onboarding is one of those things that really can accelerate it, can really set people up for success. And I believe that, I should mention, I believe that not only when people are coming in from the outside, but when they're being promoted, they deserve another onboarding. If their role has shifted, maybe they're leading the largest team they've ever led, maybe they're in a new part of the business, they still need that intentional time to understand what they're doing.
Some people need that even more than others, don't you? Like people who are maybe a little bit perfectionistic in their leadership style, they want to do a really good job, or even employees who maybe aren't in leadership roles, they need those touch points and those affirmations to know that they're doing a good job, to kind of keep their pitcher full.
I definitely think so. They need the affirmation. They also need to know, if I meet you during our onboarding, I may not even know all the questions I need to ask you, but at least I have that friendly name and face that I can go back to in 3 months or 6 months when I do finally have a question and, think, oh, I know who to ask about that. It can really help people not feel like they're sort of scrambling.
Bethany, you often talk about in your training that sort of aha moment when somebody truly understands themselves. Could you share a memorable example where such an insight sort of transformed a leader's approach, a leader that you were working with?
Sure. This happens a lot with leaders. Sometimes that comes from, I mentioned I do stakeholder interviews when I'm doing coaching. So I'll give you an example. I was working with a female leader who's in a pretty creative role within an organization. And she's one of those people who really had gotten a lot of praise for she was very direct, she was very candid, she was very honest, and she rubbed a lot of people the wrong way. But to her, she would say, well, but my intention was to be honest, and it was to be truthful, and I was speaking up for what needed to be said. So I did her stakeholder interviews, and what came back is people really liked her, but sometimes just felt like she was clobbering them with the truth, like she was using the truth as like a weapon against them in a meeting. And she had a real aha moment about one of the things we really delved into is there's your intention, and her intention was to be truthful and helpful, but then there was the impact. And people don't always see your intention, but they will see your impact. And so for her, she understood, oh, in a different way, this is really actually holding me back from being as productive and as effective as I could be. And again, I'm not trying to change who she is. I'm just working with her on behaviors. And she had some things she started doing to remind herself of how she wanted, she would go into meetings with an intention of how she wanted to go in. She kept this little sticky note with some words that were important to her. She had a habit of listening in a way where she was almost scowling. So she tried to break herself of that habit. She didn't mean anything by the scowl, but even something like that ended up making people feel like she wasn't really listening to them.
That's so interesting. Oh my gosh. Yeah, those nonverbals can be just as impactful as some of our verbals. So what are some of the key strategies that you recommend to help people develop teams and even female-led teams and help them perform their best? You've talked about developing leaders, but team development is also important in organizations and collaboration in order to get the work done.
Absolutely. Each team I work with, again, what I do is very specific to the team. So I certainly get to know if there are, clear needs there. But what I find is there are a couple of things that cut across most teams. One of them is trust, and the other one is the ability and willingness to engage in healthy conflict. So almost every time I'm working with a team, these two things come up. There may be other things as well. When it comes to trust, I focus a lot on the concept of psychological safety, which I think to some people sounds, I don't know if it sounds sort of like intangible, ethereal. Here's what it means. Psychological safety is the idea that I feel safe being vulnerable with you, taking a risk with you. Maybe I need to ask you for help. Maybe I need to tell you I think you're wrong. Maybe I need to, admit we made a mistake, whatever that is. When there is that psychological safety among members of a team, and especially with the leader of the team, trust is much easier to build. When there isn't that psychological safety, when it's more fear-based, or I've been embarrassed by my team leader when I made a mistake before, whatever that looks like, it erodes trust. So that's something I work on. And then the other one is the healthy conflict. We don't want fight and we don't want flight. I'm very influenced, and I leverage this approach that is around, you can be honest and respectful in how you engage in conflict. You don't want one without the other. If I'm only nice and I never tell you the truth, that isn't going to help anyone. If I'm really honest and I don't do it in respectful ways, that also doesn't work. And so I spend a lot of time with teams on, and I need to understand, are they avoiding conflict and maybe just having it in side conversations outside of the room? Are they, approaching conflict with aggression, or just, it's way too harsh as it's coming out? But I know that somewhere in there, their ability to talk through and actually disagree with each other in healthy ways is critical for the functioning of a team. So I usually start with trust and healthy conflict.
That's beautiful. I love it. I love it. So how do you provide advice for your leaders who try to create a culture of continuous learning and self-improvement within their organizations? How do you facilitate that and foster that as a leadership coach?
Sure. When I'm working with a leader who is sitting at the top of an organization, whether that's a C-suite leader or the head of a department, it starts with them. So it starts with them engaging in continuous learning. And some of that, there is some vulnerability there. There is some vulnerability in a leader stepping forward to say, I'm learning too, right? There's somewhere I want to improve too. I believe leaders are always learning. And I always think, if I was having surgery, I wouldn't want a surgeon that went to medical school 20 years ago and hasn't taken another class since then. Sure. And in the same way, I don't want to be led by somebody who's been leading the same way, for 20 years. So I do think there's power in a leader being vulnerable enough to say, here's what I'm working on. Here's my developmental goal for the year. And then I think there is an effort that's made. I think cultures where there is continuous learning, they're making that effort. They're helping people understand maybe where they need to develop. They're helping them think about their career paths and where they want to go. They're helping them understand where gaps might exist, again, between where they are now and where they want to be, and then helping those associates figure out, well, what do I need? Do I need experiences? Is there a task force I need? Is there an assignment I could step into? Is there, somebody else going on leave and I could, take over some part of their role and see what I think? Are there people with whom they need to meet? Do they need a mentor? Do they need other relationships inside or outside of the company? And then also what kind of training or books or, what else, what more formal things can we expose them to? So when I see companies that are really great at continuous learning, they're making those efforts with their people.
That's great. I want to come back a little bit to our earlier conversation about women making career transitions. Mm-hmm. And you and I have both done that. Yes. And I see men and women doing that midlife, later in life. Like there's no time that's, it can't happen and can't be successful. You see people reinventing themselves at 30, 40, 50 now. And it's pretty cool when they can do it and be successful. How does leadership development support these career transitions? And what emerging female leaders, what do they need to keep in mind when they actually do decide to pivot in their careers or they do decide to go out on their own? What advice do you have for them and how can your work support that?
Sure. So not only can I help support female leaders in my work, I can talk about my own experience with it. I mean, I myself went through, yes, as you mentioned, a really significant career change. I think one of the things that's helpful as you are making a pivot, and so I share this, I could share my own journey, I share this with other leaders, is in order to begin well, you need to end well. And so I did this for myself. I do this with other leaders. I'm working.
You did it over 10 months. I mean, that's like a storybook and how to leave a job.
So some of it is like, what are the things I need to end well? Are there people with whom I want to connect? Yeah. Are there, just frankly, did I put all of my doctor's appointments on the calendar here at work and I need to, right? There gets to like very nitpicky things. But what are all the ways in which I'd like to be able to have closure to what I was doing? And then in starting to plan, then what do I need to do to transition well and then begin well? So I have worked with leaders who are making those kinds of changes on what are those things you'll need to do to feel like you're beginning well. Some people have a lot of risk tolerance and they are willing to jump in with both feet with no safety net and just make those career pivots. But a lot of people want to be a little more planful about it. And so sometimes it's a matter of, okay, you're still in the role you've had, but how do you start to set yourself up for where you want to go? If that's starting your own company, what are those things you can do? If it's you're looking for other jobs, beginning to say, how can you explore that career that you think you want to transition to? With whom do you need to connect? Are there certifications you need? But really getting into both big picture and then little detail things to help them feel like they're going into that pivot as an informed, participant in it and feeling like they're owning it versus jumping in and not really knowing what to do next.
Okay. And once they do that, are there certain styles, certain leadership styles they need to be mindful of and to try to develop? And if so, how do you help female entrepreneurs identify that and consider that so that they're as effective as they can be when they launch?
Absolutely. I think one of the things that really helps people, it helps at other points in the career too, but it certainly helps during a career pivot, is curiosity. I have seen and worked with many leaders who, in stepping into it, you might go from being an expert at what you have been doing to somewhat of a novice in some way. So I'll use myself as an example. When I started my business, with the greatest of passion, and I kept saying to my husband, I know how to do the work. I don't actually know how to get the work. Like, I've worked at a company for more than 20 years. I've never done business development. I've never done marketing. And people kept saying to me, it'll come. Clients will come. And I was really unsatisfied with that as an answer because I wanted to feel like I was doing something more active to make them come, to want them to come. And so I just started learning. I started taking courses and reading books on business development and on marketing. I found a business development coach who really helped me, and it unlocked some things for me. But I had to go into that with curiosity. I couldn't say, I know how to do all of this work, and yes, they will come to me. I needed to be curious about, there's something new here for me. What do I need to learn so that I can be effective in this? And I have seen that with many female leaders and entrepreneurs as they're making a change, that curiosity about where might I have gaps? What do I need to learn? With whom should I connect? I take female entrepreneurs through an exercise of really thinking through who their network is and how they might leverage that network in different ways, because especially as they're launching a business, not all of your clients will come from where you think they will. People with whom you've had a connection don't end up being maybe as important a connection as others are. And so even that is just great to approach with curiosity.
That curiosity concept is so powerful. But you touched on something else as you were talking there. You touched a little bit on a particular mentor maybe that helped you. We have a lot of women on this show who talk about their mentors and the 2 or 3 people in their world who helped them launch or to continue to be successful once they were launched, or maybe they were redeveloping an organizational plan or tweaking their mission or growing their business. Are there 2 or 3 mentors in your life that have helped you in this transition and into this world of consulting and leadership training?
Absolutely. I've had the great fortune of having several mentors. And like I said, I had a business development coach that I hired. I wouldn't call her a mentor, but she was a tremendous advisor to me for really the better part of a year.
Yeah, because we can't do it alone.
No,
I think a lot of people think they have to figure this out on their own, and it really, in my experience, isn't possible. Mm-hmm. You need that network and you need those mentors. So talk to us a little more about that.
Absolutely. I'll tell you that when I started thinking about leaving my corporate role to really launch this business, I asked another female business owner that I know who does similar work. She also does executive coaching and some other things, and she is fantastic at what she does. I asked her to have breakfast with me, and I told her, I'm thinking about doing this, and she was so helpful. And one of the things she said at that breakfast still sticks out to me years later. She said, "I don't see you as competition because there's enough work out here for all of us. And so I will help you however you want to get the work." And I was so blown away by that mindset of abundance that she could say, there is so much leadership need out here. There's so much work to be done in leadership development. And she really stuck by that. She really made some great introductions for me. What's been really nice is now I'm almost 6 years into it, and I've been able to do the same for her, and we have remained very close. But she was really instrumental in helping me and also talking through. She started her business about 5 years before I did. And so she was great in terms of how she had done certain things or how she thought about certain things. And now that maybe we're a little more like peers, we're able to help each other, which is really nice. Although I do still turn to her, for her advice at times. I have also not been shy to approach other business owners, including ones outside of my industry. And maybe this is where some more of that curiosity comes in, but I'm willing to learn from anyone. So I have a good friend, and he and his wife do something completely different. They do data analytics and marketing. It's nothing to do with what I do. But I have learned so much about how they run their business and what that looks like. And so that's been really important to me too.
Your natural curiosity to pick up all those little nuggets and to observe and to take that in and incorporate it into what you need to do is really special. And I think that's a huge thing for people out there who are wondering how to do all this. It's really comes down to the kind of observer you are, how curious you are, how passionate you are. All these things that you're talking about are just so important.
Yes, thank you. I would also say, it helps that I'm an extrovert because I get energy from these activities. And I know for the more introverted clients with whom I work, they have to manage their energy around these things. But the other thing I have done is I have a network of other coaches, and we get together usually once a quarter for lunch. And sometimes it's advice. Sometimes, we just pretend like we're a work team, right? Who's getting together to do something social.
Yeah, you need a team too.
Exactly. So I have not been shy about seeking other people out.
That's great. And it sounds like you're so busy and you're so successful and you have so many irons in the fire. How are you managing that work-life balance, Bethany? You've got kids. When you started this journey, they were small. Now they're teenagers. How do you manage all that?
I feel very fortunate. One, I do a lot of work from home. I have a lot of clients that aren't here in Central Ohio, so I'm working with them virtually. So I'm there when my kids get home. Now they are teenagers, so they don't necessarily need me for hours, but I am there when they get home from school. And I have also been very fortunate. My husband is very involved. We have other family here in town. I've sought out other help as well. So actually, while I'm here with you right now, I have somebody at my house who helps me with errands. I decided that was something I could outsource, and it gave me that errands are the things I enjoy the least, and it gave me more time when I'm not doing work to just be with my family and not to spend my weekends when I can be with them running errands. And I feel fortunate that I can do that for a few hours a week to get some help. But even other than that, I have not been shy about asking for help. And I have found this lifestyle works for me because I have more flexibility, whether it's being with my kids, helping out my parents who are very nearby. I have more flexibility in my career now than I did in my corporate life.
What other tidbits do you have? What other pro tips do you have for the women out there who are watching the show, who are maybe just thinking about starting their own business?
I'm a proponent of starting your own business, especially, if it's something you're passionate about, if it's something you want to do. That said, I think it's good to be realistic about it. It's one of the reasons I say talk to other people doing it. I had people early on who told me, it's not all client work. You better make sure you're good at invoicing. You better make sure you're good at all of the administrative, details like that. You better learn how to do business development, and get clients and do all of those things. And so I do think it's one of the reasons talking to people can be so helpful, because you'll just really get an idea of what are all of those different things I better get good at so that not only my ideas about the business can flourish, but the business itself can flourish. And, I've had some people who've thought about it and then said, you know what, I don't want to do business development. This might be work I want to do, but I'm going to find a different way to do it. I think it's good to be realistic about all the different parts. And if you're not going to do particular parts of them, can you find a partner who will? Can you find some other resource who will help you, to do those things that maybe aren't your strong suit or just not your interest?
Is there anything else that you haven't had a chance to share about your business, or any other pieces of advice you'd like to share?
I guess, one thing I would say is I believe that, especially, I'm a woman who has, more than 25 years of experience. I see a lot of years in front of me, and I talk to a lot of women who feel that same way. And they may be feeling that pinch of, I have kids, I have parents, I have all these other things. I have seen so many women thrive at this point and really figure out what works for them and also what help they need. And so whether that's going out on your own or whether it's just really taking a run at positions of leadership where you are now, I'm just a big proponent for women doing that, finding the support they need internally, externally, at home, with friends, whatever that looks like. And really going for it. We all have a lot more years ahead of us to be successful.
You're such an inspiration. Bethany, it's been such a joy having you on the show. How do people find you after the podcast?
Absolutely. So you can find me on LinkedIn under Bethany Klynn. I also, my website is leadwithinsight.com. So I love when people find me there too. You can either through LinkedIn or through my website, send me a message. Let me know. What's the challenge you're facing? What are you looking for? If I'm not the right resource, I love connecting you, to other resources. Are you looking for a book to read? Just anything. Just would love for people to reach out to me in either of those ways.
Thank you. It's been delightful.
Oh,
Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for joining us on this episode of She Means Business, Building and Scaling with Visionary Women. If you're enjoying the show, please feel free to rate, subscribe, and leave a review wherever you listen to your podcasts. That helps others find the show, and we greatly appreciate it. Once again, we're glad you joined us, and we hope you'll come back for the next episode of She Means Business, Building and Scaling with Visionary Women. Until next time.